Now that we are recording, let's assume we didn't cover the last 10 elements because they were not interesting. We'll have 3 demos, Zoltani and William, if we have the time to do so. And now, August 14, icons for user, disabled and enabled events. Just going back for meaningful changes, the shortcode templates module has been merged. The tabs in the documentation syntax, the syntax for the tabs in documentation has changed. This is a new syntax. This is the old one and this is the new one. Upgrade to 3.17, Thread updated, SQL updated. Fix the bug that will not show the media in by default when you open the first time the window. Upgraded Bootstrap for 5.2. Fixed contained IDs, which should now be consistent over time and not be regenerated. And that's it for the important changes. So going back here, icons for user disabled and enabled events. So some UI stuff, icons in the list of users. Actions menu zone to Widget.SummaryAdmin. Actions menu zone to Widget.SummaryAdmin. So where is the Widget.SummaryAdmin used in the layers, I assume?
Yeah, so it's used in the layers, and I made a new zone for the actions menu when I refactored the search stuff in the contents list. But I did not put it there, so you couldn't delete zones delete widgets from zones for a while.
Okay. Fixes. Fixes IsSectionDefined exception in layout. Fixes IsSectionDefined exception in layout. Yep. Okay. So that can throw an exception. When? Or maybe it's that can throw an exception. Yeah. Okay. Niraj, ZoneonDemand Tests. Ooh. Tests. Good job. Apparently, Jean-Thierry and Niraj talked. Update configuration documentation. Jean-Thierry is updating docs now. Why is that? Password configuration, reading configuration from Excel config file. Okay, explaining where the files are, which ones to change, and how to inject it in your startup. Good job. Fixes pager links. Okay. Fix docs typo. Okay. How is this used? It's weird to have something called default value.
Yeah, remember we talked about that. It's in the UI and the admin, or you can set a value for the shortcode when it's selected from the modal to return. So So it either has a default value
But why is it
or it
different
just returns. Sorry?
Why is it different than the property itself? Why is there a field and a property?
Because that, when you expand it, will look to see if it's actually had a default value provided, and if it doesn't, it returns the actual shortcode registration value. I don't know why it had to move to the top there. It makes no sense, but anyway.
Fixed dependency between list and contents module. Interesting. So I assume something has moved.
Yeah, so I remember we talked about that maybe. The lists modules creating dynamic permissions. So I've moved that to core as well, to contents.core. And there was a lot of other stuff, but that was the only thing that actually had to move.
Remove injection of expressionEvaluator in class setup tenant task. Setup tenant task has an expressionEvaluator. Now it doesn't have it anymore, but it's using that thing, which must be a parameter somewhere. Let's assume that it is. Fix regression with Taxonomy ContentPart.TermAdmin. ContentPart.TermAdmin. Is that
so that's returning a shape that I removed because I didn't think it was used when we did the tag stuff, and it is used, but it's just rare. You made it originally, and it was right.
That's been good. So Yann, check for groupings existence in ContentZone. Groupings. Oh, okay, I see. If there is a group, if there is one group, that's weird. Why would we check that if there is one group?
So what happened was he'd used some of the sample code to, I think, remove the title from a zone, but by that time the zone then existed. So it tried to group it and render it, but it had nothing in it, so it returned a null exception. So basically it's essentially saying, has this zone got any items in it? Because it is possible to end up with a zone that doesn't have any if you've placed some there and then remove them later.
At that point, it can only be one. Fix link in Razor documentation. Fix shortcode interface registration. Interesting. Yeah. So if you have a T somewhere here, okay, as an shortcode provider, okay. RazorPage enhancements. Model binder accessor filter. iPage filter, page model updater. Okay, page CS. Okay, so including these in the page also, in the Razor page. fixes ShapeResult copy. Okay, there was a T here on a dynamic string, which is wrong. Thank you for changing that. In the header, CSHTML, where is that? Demo. Okay, that was a demo. Good. Display driver base. Okay. Interesting. There was a bug in display driver base. Cognon 557, just minor update, fixes Facebook options SaveTokens. Okay, which was not forwarded. There was a big PR from Mikey recently to support that option, and apparently he missed this one. I saw the issue from, I think, Claire mentioning that. Fixes async await usage. So I saw the PR and I commented, and I think it was, yeah, I think that's what I suggested to do, to transform it to be async until I find that I see a get awaiter get result, which so far I don't see. Okay, and yes, everything has been converted to async. So it was doable, breaking change, but necessary breaking change. Good.
Yeah, we've kept the originals there as well, because they were just extension methods. So there's no breaking change here for anybody.
Ooh. Good. Add IShapePlacementProvider and ShapeTablePlacementProvider. We are entering some interesting code, I assume here. Placement providers. IShapePlacementProvider. Interesting. Placement providers. Let me see. Where is the iShape? Where is this interface? IShapePlacementProvider. Same time, I have a screen, but I don't use it. Oh, interfaces.cs. That's the new convention. Well, apparently it was already there. Crazy. IShapePlacementProvider represent a marker interface for classes to provide shape placement information. I think it's only singular information. I don't think it's ever plural. Build contextualized. I placement info resolver, build placement info resolver async. Resolve placement. Woo. So it's some refactoring. Okay, nothing here. Nothing here. And this is the one, shape table placement provider. It's just refactoring so far, just to be able to extend it to provide more implementations. It will be interesting to know the the context, what it's trying to do with that extensibility.
I expect we'll see a PR coming through shortly for
You say?
for a templates for a placement module for the admin.
Cool. For the admin, then so it's an admin placement module for the front end or for the admin?
It will probably operate very similar to liquid templates in the admin, in that it will be about providing placement for the front end, from what I've seen of it.
But no, placement is evil. So we don't want it. We want to remove placement. We don't want to add more ways to change a placement. I'll try to talk about it later. We had a discussion with Dean during triage. But it was during no, it was not during triage, right? No, we called. We had a call about something different.
Talk about it some more. Yeah, my demo will be a little bit related to that.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you, Thierry. Always great contributions. And it takes some time to be able to do such PRs because you need to understand all the ways shapes are used for placement. Update package dependencies. Okay. And finally, workflow task to validate user. What does it mean here, link? Okay. You know?
There should be a doc, a specific doc for each one.
Okay. It means there will be a link sometime. Okay. Select all view components. What changed here? Oh, okay, the component has changed. Except. So this is to extract the email from a template for the current user. And this is to validate a user to ensure the user is authenticated and has specific roles or not specific roles. Okay, done. Good job, everyone. Let's do the demos. Just a note, I have a meeting at 1 sharp, so I will leave at 1 sharp. Zoltan.
All right, let me share my screen. And in the meantime, let me share a link. Yeah, so what I would like to briefly show is our analyzers project. I assume everybody here knows static code analyzers. Of course, what's built into Visual Studio is one default thing, but there are a lot of other analyzer projects out there, and it's Roslyn opening up the compiler APIs. A lot of new analyzers popped up. So what these analyzers do is that they can find issues with your code. Of course, again, Visual Studio does the same thing to an extent, but there are all, other similar analyzers that can find even more issues, and various coding issues, hidden security problems, or just formatting problems. So you can also configure what your formatting style is, and these analyzers will automatically find any issues with that. Of course, the advantage here is that your code will be better, and reviews can be easier because there will be no trivial or easy to find or easy to fix but hard to find issues. And in our .NET Analyzers project that I linked to, which is of course open source, we have gathered few of these analyzer projects and configured them, and now it's in a package that you can just simply add to your solution, or in this case we are actually using it as a Git submodule, and magically it will work and analyze every project in your solution. So for example, it can detect issues like this. Here we have an interface, and it says that, okay, but it needs documentation. Well, this has documentation, but it doesn't have documentation in a form that IntelliSense would understand, and you would get displayed in IntelliSense, you know, the 3 slashes with summary tag. Or it can also notice issues, or more important issues like this one here, that here we have an iDisposable instantiation that is not disposed, which can cause quite a bit of issues, memory leaks and everything. Furthermore, it also lets us know that this is actually an unused variable, which of course Visual Studio can also do. But naming guidelines can also be enforced. So for example, we see this getShapes methods here, which returns a task. So there is that guideline that such methods should be named or suffixed with async, and that's exactly what it says at the async suffix. So we gathered these analyzers into this project and configured it in a way that is more or less compatible with what we have been doing in Orchard for the last decade. Not completely, because there are some, I would say, intuitive rules, like how we format method arguments. Because with drivers, when drivers return something like the initialize method, then we always have some of the methods, some of the parameters in the first line and some of the parameters in the second line, like here. Now, this is not something that an analyzer could understand unless we write our own. And so, unfortunately, this needs to be fixed to something like this. But otherwise, these rules follow the Orchard guidelines. So yeah, some food for thought. Also, feel free to use it in your own projects, and we can configure this for Orchard as well. I mean, adapt it. And I know that there is at least an editor config, but we can add further analyzers there as well.
Thank you. So something I missed is, you're reusing existing analyzer, okay, FXCOP and others.
Yeah.
But you're configuring it.
Yes.
So is it configured with editor config?
Sorry, this is a.
How do you configure an analyzer?
There is a rule set file. Let me add it to the solution here. There is also Visual Studio support for it, so it's a bit better to add it than just a simple text file. Now it's loading, so yeah, here it is. So for example,
this is FXCOP, right?
Partially, yes. That's one of the 3 ones, and also StyleCop and also Sonar Analyzer.
Oh, I see. So this, okay, the general rule set is for all the analyzers. Okay, I see. I didn't know that.
Yes. So you see, you have this GUI for setting all the rules, but in the end, it will be a text file, XML configuration file.
Okay. And that's why you make a module, because the module will have this file, so it will be included in your project automatically.
It's a Git submodule, so it's not an Ocean module.
That's what I meant. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's right. Furthermore, there is a bit of MS build magic. So these files are automatically added to every project because normally you would need to add packages for these analyzers and the configuration files to every project.
Can't you make it a NuGet package?
Sorry?
Can't you make it a NuGet package directly?
That would be possible as well. We are currently testing it out, so we haven't packaged it up yet, but that would actually work too, yes.
But this is the way we do that with the application package, the module package, the theme package, that package targets, which are NuGet packages, and we can still inject directory props and custom MS build commands and custom files. So that would be maybe interesting to just point to a NuGet package more than having to define a submodule indeed.
Yeah, possibly. The advantage of the submodule is though that you put it there. You also put a directory props file in the root of the solution, and then it works. So a NuGet package you have to install to a project, but then there needs to be a single project.
The reference and then done. It will restore and work. It just works. Yeah, the package reference. I don't see how harder it is.
You need to add the package reference to a project. So then there will be a singular project that is kind of the root of these.
Okay. Now I get it.
Because this automatically adds all the packages and all the config files to every project in the solution with directory props.
Makes sense. Interesting.
Yeah, and you see all the issues here in Visual Studio, but .NET Build also just outputs everything here. That's what we are actually doing. That's good for continuous integration. You can also make the build fail if any issues are here. So quite useful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it useful or helpful?
It's useful. It's more than helpful, I would say. There is a return on investment.
Thank you. Next, Dean.
Sure. Thanks, Zoltan. Let me share my screen. Let me know when you can see that.
Yeah, good.
Excellent. Okay, so Sebastian and I have been having the odd chat about placement and templates and shapes and how hard they can be. I spent a little bit of time recently just looking at ways that other languages like Angular, or frameworks like Angular and Vue work in terms of a component model. And then I kind of came back to Orchard, and I took the blog recipe and I said, what would this look like if I built it in Angular? Which bits would be reusable components?
Sorry, I want to interrupt you. I want to talk about why we had this discussion and not just right to where you get to. So I've been complaining a few times the past weeks about the complexity of building a site in Orchard. Okay, what makes it hard? Okay, and I said the ultimate solution would be to just remove the templating in Orchard and just use decoupled. So you don't have to know about shapes at all. No more shapes. And then you just write your pages, your controllers. You have lots of APIs to get your content, and you can reuse ASP.NET caching, you can reuse ASP.NET partials, you can reuse just ASP.NET and do your site like this. Okay, it's a decoupled site. Let's just forget about shapes and rendering everything from module. Just let people render their own things and provide tools to render their site. And it might be slower at first to build a site, but they will never be blocked by I don't know what the shape is. I don't understand how shapes work. What is placement? What is placement info? What is the list of alternates I can use to change that and so on? And so that's the first point. And the second point I wanted to make was to say that we have themes today and recipes that build some predefined solutions, like a blog, like an agency, a site, and it can be extended to anything. Well, you still have to understand all the shape and display mechanism to build these elements, but at least someone using that will not have to, okay? It's already reusable. So my solution to that will be to still create recipes, but recipes that will contain Razor pages and controllers and anything that will build a blog, even if we didn't have shapes and placement and everything. Like build a decoupled site, that is a blog, and this is a recipe. So when you install it, you have the same blog, the same thing working. And if you want to change it, you don't have to learn shapes. You just look at the page that renders the blog, the partial that renders the blog post, and you just change it. Or you create a new one and you change the code directly. It's just ASP.NET. There is nothing new to learn out of ASP.NET. That was my target. I think that was the solution to have. And then we talked with Dean, and Dean tried to convince me, I think he managed to convince me to say the issue is not shapes, because shapes are great. And the issues are, and that's why I wrote in the OneNote, what he suggested was the issue is zones and placement. Okay, this is what is hard, because shapes, in the end, if you just take shapes by themselves, they are just a dynamic view model that has alternates and that can be rendered using templates. It's like a partial. It's like a view component in ASP.NET, but it's like a view component with more features. Like it can have an ID, CSS class, attributes. It can have dynamic behavior. It can have cache. It has alternates, so it has dynamic resolution of templates, which a view component doesn't have. So this is where we stopped, and now I will let Dean continue discussion and to make the bridge between what I just said and what Dean just said about Angular and React components. Let's think about a shape as a reusable component, like a view component in ASP.NET, but like an orchard shape component that can be reused.
Thanks, Sebastian. That's probably a better summary than I started with. So what I did was I went into Angular, which I'm quite familiar with, and I said, what would a blog site look like if I built it in Angular with components? This just to kind of refresh on everybody, this is what the blog looks like in our standard kind of template. So we have quite a big zone here, area where we build a header component, and then we render a bit of the shapes that have been produced by the drivers. And when you look at this, when I first looked at this header, I was like, right, okay, so why isn't this a shape? This is all very similar code. We've got it here. We've got it on the blog post as well. You know, it's exactly the same code. Why am I? So I looked at that and I was like, that just doesn't add up to me. And we've got it here on the article as well. And then I looked at it a little bit closer and I was like, right, so this one is basically identical. It's got a different image for it. And this bit here is different. And then if we go to the blog itself, or the post probably, we'll find that the subheading is different. It's an H2 instead of a span, and it has a meta class. And I thought, right, okay, so that doesn't kind of, it's complicated to turn this into a shape that's actually a little bit reusable, and make this template make sense. And a little bit of background on this at the moment as well. At the moment, I'm doing a similar kind of a zone, a header zone, and I've got 20 content types. So I've got 20 templates that I need to build that all have some very, very common functionality. So I looked at what that would look like in Angular. for example, and it would, for me, it would be quite simple. I would have in my kind of base component a header component. I'd have a title. I'd have a text field component, and I'd put these things into what are known as slots. And then when we went into the actual header itself, you'd have all that kind of standard gubbins, and then you'd just say, this is where I want my title slot to turn up. And then when I built the blog post page, which had a different subheading, the page itself would just look like HTML subheading. Kind of thing. So to come back to Orchard and code, wherever it is. So I said to myself, what would that look like in Orchard? And I've done it in Razor for the moment, but I've done it in such a way that you could do it, we can probably do it for Liquid. So I've taken the old blog template, which is this, which is quite large and kind of is used in like 3 places. And I've introduced the idea of some slight alterations to some of our shape tag helpers, where we can actually, in kind of an ordinary template, nest different bits of content, different slots, different HTML, other shapes, in a way that they look readable, they look like HTML, they're understandable. Like, I think they are anyway. I look at this and I'm like, well, this kind of makes sense. It's a shape. It's the header shape. It's got some properties on it. Oh, then it's going to do a title thing. Then it's going to do the subheading, and it all kind of adds up. And then when you get down to the actual reusable shape, again, it kind of adds up. It goes into the zone, the header zone. It's got the media path. It renders the slots. And I've got an option there for required false, which I haven't actually implemented yet, but that was kind of actually where I ended up when I started looking at kind of how hard shapes were for people. And if we go back to the blog template, I kind of did an example here of what this might look like if you had to actually make a shape to do it, just in Razor. So you have to make a new shape. You have to assign some properties to it. You have to give it the title property. You have to make another shape and another template, especially for the subheading. Then you can give it the shape that has the value for the subheading. And you end up with a template that looks like this, which is quite, that makes quite good sense. But you also have to end up with another template here, and another template here, and another template here, just to handle all these slight alterations that are happening to the content because they want a different. One wants a span, one wants an H2. So it's more than just kind of classes, it's actual content itself. So another example here. So the example here in this one is that this gets to turn into an H2, and it's just an inline template. This is actually I've got a link there somewhere. After looking at Angular, I started looking at web components and reminded myself how they worked. And the template slot concept is actually there in web components, which is why I've named it as I have. Where's the example that they show? Something very similar. So yeah, they define a slot like this, and their example is they change from a span. Here it changes to a UL and a list. So the content can change quite dramatically, while still being reasonably clear about how the template is defined. So it's very easy to kind of come in here and look and say, oh, there it is. It does some things. So that's kind of where I got to. I've got another branch as well, Seb, which has a kind of component model which actually builds these at the time you call them rather than from a driver. So you just get to say, just send the JSON of what the thing is, but that one loses some of the nice things that zones and placements do for us. The kind of
nice and complex things that it provides.
The nice and complex things. The biggest thing that it loses if you don't have the drivers happening is, if we looked at, I think we'll probably see it on this. You lose things like the title, and you lose things like RSS feeds that are all come in automatically and are all the kind of advantages that we get from a system.
They are pushed by the system into predefined zones, and in the new model, you have to explicitly pull them from some API to say, now I want to inject some RSS feed, provide me the RSS feed. So it's not automated this way anymore. There might be solutions to still do that.
I think there are solutions. One example in the template here is we're actually already doing that. In this particular one, we're saying render the title because we know that that's there. One of the other things I've been doing is in placement, automatically, because I don't want to call this every time because I'll forget, because I'm forgetful, is I automatically move that to a header zone in the layout for everything, because I always want a title. I always want a page title, and that could be one kind of thing, is for that common stuff. Not to render it as part of the content zone, but to move it more to a layout zone as such, potentially.
Okay. Thank you. I will have to wrap up the meeting because it's almost time. But that looks promising. I like the custom zones, the custom tags for templates, and I will definitely look into the Mozilla MDN page for the web components to see if there is something we can get from that. I'm also wondering if it should not be something directly in MVC. So today they have view components, which I think very few use. Maybe they should go further and have something more like a web component, but on the server side, with also dynamic template resolution like shapes do. So maybe something between shapes and view component that might be interesting in MVC directly.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of sorry, I know you've got to wrap up. A lot of what I'm doing here is less about shapes and more about tag helpers, to be honest. But yeah, let's talk more about that.
Cool. Thanks a lot for your effort. William, next week. Sorry.
Sure, you can do it next week.
Questions, comments? Anyone?
Looks quite cool.
Well, I've done a lot of work with web components, and I see lots of different issues that haven't been solved. So we can talk about that later.
Definitely. We can also continue conversation next week. If you can talk about, if you want to talk about it, the things you like and don't like with components and what we have in .NET Core and SP.NET Core. Will be interesting. Thanks, everyone. See you on Thursday for triage or next week, same time. Bye-bye. Good day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. All right, thanks.